Hey everyone! The reception to my video defending Shockwave in Transformers Dark of the Moon was very positive. So much so that I even got several requests to make another like it defending other characters in the Transformers films, with Soundwave being the most requested character for me to defend. I honestly already wanted to do some more Transformers movie character defense videos, including one on Soundwave, but it all depended on how my Shockwave defense video was received. But again, the people have spoken, and here we are. If you haven't seen that Shockwave video, by the way, I'd recommend doing so, as this video will kind of act as a follow-up to that one, and that one also provides a bit of prior context to all this. Now, before I begin, in wake of some changes to this channel and responses I received from my Shockwave defense video, it has come to my attention that I need to address several things. While I believe that what I have to address here is important as it relates to understanding the channel changes as well as fully understanding this video and others like it, I can see why some of you may just want to get straight to my Soundwave defense regardless, so if you wish to do so, jump to the timestamp on the screen to get right into the Soundwave stuff. Alright, so first of all, in relation to this channel, I recently made channel memberships available, but never really addressed it. Basically, I didn't want to try to make up some artificial rewards to act as some incentive for joining the channel. Joining the channel is purely just donation-based. If you wish to support me and my channel, donate however much you feel like through the membership tiers or super thanks. But if you do join, I still threw in some emojis and badges to use anyway for fun. Maybe I'll even do early video access. But nevertheless, that's all I wanted to say on that, and you just watching these videos is support enough as is, so thank you for that. Anyway, moving on. Based on some comments from my Shockwave video that I saw, some appear to confuse the difference between a headcanon and an inference, which could affect how some view and have viewed these videos. See, while people liked my points in my Shockwave video, some were under the impression that a lot of it was a headcanon of mine, believing my statements about Shockwave's actions in Transformers Dark of the Moon to be a headcanon is incorrect, and not what I was trying to communicate. By saying those points are my headcanon, it implies that what I stated about Shockwave in the film was just stuff I came up with, and not actually intended to be conveyed by the film. This defeats the whole purpose of the video. Because yeah, anyone can believe anything they want about any character whether it's true or not, based on what they think, or what their headcanon is. I was trying to prove that Shockwave wasn't wasted and weak in Transformers Dark of the Moon as some claim he was, by calling attention to several factors in the film that, while not outright stated to us by the film directly, were left by the filmmakers for us to pick up on and make inferences off of that prove Shockwave to be the opposite of these claims. Now, to make sure all of us are on the same page here, I'm going to make an example of the difference between headcanon and inference about events. For this example, I'm going to refer to a scene from The Office. I actually have not seen much of The Office at all. Yeah, I know, I've really only seen just a few handful of episodes of it over the years. However, I was recently reminded of something in one of the few episodes I had seen that I believe is a good example of writers wanting the audience to make an inference about something without any characters outright stating it to us. In Season 5, Episode 28 of The Office, there is a bit where manager Michael Scott has fallen asleep at his desk. The staff want to take advantage of this in order to try to leave work early, and plan to make Michael think it is much later in the day than it actually is when he wakes up. They try to pull this off by changing several clocks around the office that Michael would see to now read that it is almost 5 o'clock, the time they get off work. One of these clocks being a clock in Michael's car. Dwight goes to take care of the clock in the car while Jim and Pam take care of the rest. During this, we're shown a shot of Dwight running through the parking lot heading back inside, having just changed the clock in Michael's car. Now, if you look closely, you can see that Dwight is not wearing any shoes in this shot. This is the first and last time we see Dwight without shoes here. The show never has him explain it, nor does anyone else ever acknowledge or question it, leaving us, the audience, to wonder why he was running around the parking lot without shoes. However, if you go back a little, we see that as Jim and Pam are preparing to head into Michael's room to change the time on his computer and watch, for a brief moment, the camera shows us that they are not wearing shoes. This is to help them be as quiet as possible as to not wake up Michael when they are changing the time on things either right next to or right on him. But while standing there shoeless before heading into Michael's room, Dwight comes right up to them and asks what he can do to help. Dwight was there to see them shoeless, and knows the context as to why they are shoeless. So, when we see Dwight after this running through the parking lot without shoes, even though the show in no way or form calls it out, we can now infer that he is shoeless because he is copying what we know we saw Jim and Pam doing earlier in an effort to be stealthy like they were. Of course, we can also infer that Dwight didn't realize that he didn't even have to do this, as Jim and Pam took off their shoes to be as silent as possible, being so close to Michael sleeping, whereas Dwight obviously didn't have to since he was way out in the parking lot, but figured that since Jim and Pam did it to be stealthy, he should probably do the same. This is a joke. A very subtle joke discreetly added by the writers that the show never makes apparent, and because of this, it is a joke that one may miss if one doesn't pay attention to Dwight for these few seconds. Pointing this subtle, quick joke out to those who missed it is not expressing a headcanon. It is an inference. See, even though the show never acknowledges that this joke happened, the fact is, the pieces leading to it were put there intentionally by the writers so that viewers could pick up on them, and thusly, make an inference as to what they all mean and led to, which is the realization of this joke. That is what I was arguing for Shockwave in his defense video. In that video, I was pointing out all of these pieces in Transformers Dark of the Moon added by the writers that many people seem to have not picked up on, or outright ignored, and explaining the obvious conclusion the writers wanted us to come to when taking all of these pieces they left into consideration, also known as an educated inference, and not a headcanon. Now, let's use that same office scene to give an example of what a headcanon would be here. A headcanon would be for me to say that in this scene, I believe that Dwight acted like a ninja as he made his way out to the parking lot due to how everyone was being silent and stealthy. We do not see this. There is no evidence that it happened, and no one ever says it happened. Yet, taking into consideration the character of Dwight and how he behaves, I can say this is something I'd like to believe he did based on what we know and have seen from him, even though I have no proof that he actually did it. This is a headcanon. Unlike an inference, it is something that the viewer entirely makes up that could have potentially happened based on trivial information known about someone or something within media, and how they tend to behave or act, even though there is no evidence for it. Meanwhile, an inference is an educated conclusion one comes to based off of real things or events that are explicitly shown to happen within a piece of media. This is the point of these defense videos. To use elements that we are outright shown and told in the films about these characters to prove points about them, and show why they were utilized well and fit the characters they were supposed to be portrayals of when many people say they are otherwise. I will not be utilizing headcanons in these videos to prove points. If I even mention any headcanons of mine at all, I will make it clear that I am doing so. Like, the only true headcanon I had in my Shockwave defense video was the speculation portion about the possible existence of Senator Shockwave within the Transformers film series. I made it explicitly clear that what I was discussing in that portion was pure speculation and a headcanon of mine. Now, do all of us have a clear understanding on what these videos are aiming for and the difference between a headcanon and an inference? Okay, good. One last thing I'd like to clarify is that these videos will not be relying on the many forms of outside tie-in media that exist for these Transformers movies. I said this in my Shockwave defense video, but it seems some didn't fully understand it, so I'm just gonna re-explain it again. I am of the viewpoint that media relying on outside tie-in media to explain major things or changes within it that the writers were too lazy to explain themselves is overall flawed work, and shouldn't have to be tolerated. However, I am okay with tie-in media explaining little, unimportant things that don't affect the overall source media in any major way, such as what happened to characters who barely get any screen time, don't have a major effect on the plot, and vanish between films. Despite this, I bring all that up to say that I will not be citing any tie-in Transformers movie media to prove or make my points, as many cite this tie-in media to say that it makes the characters in the movies better by adding to them. That is not what I seek to do here, as like I did for Shockwave, I will be going off of just the films themselves to prove that these characters were good without the need of any of this outside material, such as the comics and the games. Some seem to be confused that I didn't mention the games in the Shockwave video, even though I said I wasn't counting any tie-in media, which, yeah, counts the games. Plus, it's up for debate as to how canon these comics and games even are, so. Alright, now with all that out of the way, let's discuss Soundwave. Hey, so you know what grills my cheese? Now, while I did say that Shockwave is my all-around favorite Transformers character ever, I'm also, of course, a pretty big fan of Soundwave, the stoic, blue Decepticon communications officer. Now, back in the day, in the wake of the announcement of a live-action Transformers film, many assumed that Soundwave would be appearing. In the original Transformers cartoon, he was quite a prominent Decepticon character, for the first 2 seasons anyway, so naturally many assumed he would be showing up in the film. However, even though other prominent Decepticons like Megatron and Starscream made it into the final film, Soundwave did not. He was originally planned to have a role in the film, but due to several complications, his role was changed around, then shortened, and eventually, it didn't seem like that he would make it into the film at all. There are even reports that Michael Bay and his team became so desperate to get Soundwave in the movie that they even were willing to make him this mini-con just to get him in the film. However, as we know, this idea was thrown out, with the park being changed to Frenzy, as they figured people would be greatly disappointed by Soundwave being a mere mini-con with such a small role, and that it was better to hold off on Soundwave entirely. That way, they could deliver a better Soundwave in a potential sequel, which, sure enough, due to how successful the first Transformers film was, the sequel was soon on the way. Transformers Revenge of the Fallen finally gave us Soundwave. And not only that, but the next film after it, Transformers Dark of the Moon, also had Soundwave. Honestly, I was quite fond of Soundwave in these movies, and he was one of my favorite Decepticons across all 5 films. However, I was surprised to see that many people didn't like him in the films, saying that he was underused, wasted, and weak, among other things. So, I am here today to come to the defense of Soundwave in the Transformers movies, to explain why I believe that not only was he utilized well, but why he was also a great adaptation of the character of Soundwave. I understand that this may be a bit of an uphill battle for me, maybe not so much as it was with defending Shockwave, but still, all I ask is that you hear this whole video out and everything I have to say before you make a final decision. My goal with this video is to, of course, show you why I believe that Soundwave was great in the Transformers movies when it is commonly believed that he wasn't. And if you still don't agree with me on this by the end of the video, then I hope you will at least be able to understand why I have come to this conclusion. If you do already agree that Soundwave was great in the Transformers movies, hell yeah, more power to ya. But I still encourage you to stick around anyway, as I may point out things that make him even better to you. Now, if you are someone who currently frowns upon this Soundwave, and I do manage to change your mind on him by the end of this video for the better, please let me know in the comments, I'd love to see that. Alright, now let's begin. Like I did with Shockwave, let's start by addressing Soundwave's screen time, since, like Shockwave, Soundwave's amount of screen time tends to be something that many take issue with. Except in this case, I find that defending Soundwave's screen time will be a little more difficult than it was for me to defend Shockwave's. Soundwave, of course, has more overall screen time in the film series than Shockwave does, seeing how he got to be in more films. But still, in his first film appearance in Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, Soundwave had around a little under 2 minutes of screen time. And in the next film, Transformers Dark of the Moon, he had a little over 3 minutes of screen time. Now, a major factor about my defense for Shockwave's screen time was highlighting how it was common for Shockwave to barely get screen time in anything he's in. This is a little bit harder to do with Soundwave, as Soundwave got way more screen time than Shockwave did in the original Transformers cartoon. Although, to be fair, from the time the G1 movie was released up until the years leading up to his live-action movie debut, Soundwave wasn't being used in Transformers media nearly as much. Sure, he got to do quite a lot in the first 2 seasons of the Generation 1 cartoon, but then, in the tie-in movie, he barely got any screen time at all, and even arguably had his character assassinated, as at one point he watched Starscream toss an injured Megatron out into the void of space to die, and did nothing. He even attended Starscream's coronation later without protest. We know he wouldn't do this. And then, in the later 2 seasons of the G1 Transformers show that followed the movie, he would hardly ever appear. In fact, one of the rare times he did appear was in the episode Carnage in C minor. Ooh, I still haven't recovered from that.
Broadside, blaster,
Then, after the original cartoon ended, outside of maybe a cameo here and there, Soundwave was nowhere to be seen in most Transformers media, and when he did start appearing again, it would never be for very long. In the Unicron trilogy shows, he didn't appear until the final entry, and even then, his character was different, to say the least.
You will understand how we feel once your homeworld says peace out. But for now, since we can't have you all up in our grill, it's time to clear the dance floor.
He appeared again in Transformers Animated, but only for 3 episodes. 3 seasons of Transformers television, 42 episodes in total, and Soundwave appeared in just 3 of them. I mean, I love animated Soundwave, but the guy would barely show up. Anyway, yeah, point of saying all that being, while Soundwave may have been used a lot at the beginning for a while there, over the years all the way up to his live-action film debut, he kinda had faded into the background a bit, and certainly wasn't as prominent anymore. Not only that, but Transformers Revenge of the Fallen was subject to all kinds of crazy production issues due to current strikes. And while Bay and team wanted to wait it out, others pushed for the release regardless. This led to several changes in the film, one of which being Soundwave's role unfortunately getting cut down, affecting what was supposed to be his time in the spotlight. Then, in the next film, while he did get to do more and was still prominent, he was now kinda overshadowed by new characters getting the spotlight, like Shockwave and Sentinel Prime. Plus, as I said last time, I find the heavy criticism I see these films get for their characters not getting a lot of screen time to be rather unfair as a whole. This isn't like one of the shows where animated Transformers are interacting with animated humans in an animated environment. These are real people being filmed in real-life sets and locations that the animators have to make well-animated, realistic-looking CGI giant robots navigate around and interact with. It costs tons of money, of course they don't get a ton of screen time. This is an unfortunate staple of live-action Transformers. It's a lot of money and work to pull off the Transformers in live action. They're not going to have a ton of screen time. Of course, you can cut down the amount of characters you have in a film in order to be able to afford to give some others more screen time, or lower the quality of their CGI to be able to afford to do more with them. But Transformers usually has tons of characters clashing all at once, and the franchise was known for its stellar CGI effects. To get that in live action, some screen time for the characters is going to have to be cut. It's either the Transformers get less screen time and have better CGI, or they lower the quality of their CGI and number of characters so they can get more screen time with the characters they can afford. And I feel either of those arguments is justified. So, taking into consideration that Soundwave had just not been as prominent in Transformers media for a while at the time, there were some real-world circumstances affecting his role, and it's expensive to give Transformers a lot of screen time in live action, I believe that his amount of screen time can be forgiven. Especially when you take into consideration how much Soundwave pulls off in this amount of screen time. But before we get into that, I'd like to comment on his designs. Soundwave has two designs in these films, each of which I've seen some people complain about. But as for me, I think both are great. I find both designs to be very fitting for the character of Soundwave. So why don't some people like them? Well, I'll address this one design at a time, starting with his design from Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. So, first of all, do keep in mind that this isn't his robot mode. It's his alternate mode, and due to the production issues, the robot mode, which was supposed to appear in the film at some point, was cut. And, like Shockwave's alternate mode in Transformers Dark of the Moon, it seems that Hasbro can't decide on what this Soundwave's robot mode looks like. However, we do see some aspects from his robot mode that carry into his alternate mode here that we can go off of, such as his head. Even though he's got several traditional Soundwave design aspects, like a visor and those antenna ear things, some still don't like this look. One reason why being is that you can see his eyes through his visor, and I gotta tell ya, I don't give a shit about that. Honestly, seeing his glaring eyes through his visor just makes him look all the more intimidating, and I'm all for it. Another reason people give for not liking this design is because he has a mouth, kinda. Soundwave often has a faceplate, never showing his mouth, but here, I mean, it's kinda weird. Like, he has a faceplate looking thing, but at the same time, it's also a mouth. But still, this just doesn't bother me. I like the way it's integrated into his look, and it doesn't take away from how imposing he is. Plus, this isn't something new for Soundwave, as this isn't actually the first Soundwave to have a mouth. I believe that would be the G2 Soundwave. This design is on my list of top 10 worst things I've ever seen in my life. Anyway, in the next film, Transformers Dark of the Moon, we finally see Soundwave in a robot mode. Again, I love this. But of course, some people frown on it, saying he's too short and stocky, among other things. And to that, I again don't really give a shit. I think this look fits him well. But if I were to defend this design anyway, I will say that several characteristics here are carried over from Transformers Animated. I talked about this last time with Shockwave, but I'll just mention it again here. Transformers Animated was one of the most recent Transformers shows at the time that Transformers Dark of the Moon went into production. And some characteristics from the show had influence on some of the characters in the film series. In Transformers Animated, Shockwave is rather tall, has a cannon on his right arm, has a red eye, and transforms into a tank. In Transformers Dark of the Moon, Shockwave is rather tall, has a cannon on his right arm, has a red eye, and transforms into a tank. In Transformers Animated, Lockdown is slim, has a hook, is covered in dark colors including some dark greens, has beef with Ratchet, and collects various things. In Transformers Age of Extinction, Lockdown is slim, has a hook, is covered in dark colors including some dark greens, has beef with Ratchet, and collects various things. You see what I mean? So, with that being said, in Transformers Animated, Soundwave is short, stocky, has speakers on his arms, and becomes a car. In Transformers Dark of the Moon, Soundwave is short, stocky, has speakers on his arms, and becomes a car. So yes, he is quite accurate feature-wise to an already existing Soundwave. Now, about his head, it's been changed up a bit. His mask mouth is more of just a mouth now, and the visor is gone, which are reasons people don't like this design. The idea of Soundwave not having a visor and mask sounds blasphemous, but I don't know, it just never bothered me here. I guess it's due to the fact I already was kind of braced for it. Like, in the last movie, he had his visor, but again, we could see his eyes through it, so I already knew they were there and what they looked like. Plus, he did have a mouth of sorts, so I'm not put off by it being more apparent, I guess? I mean, he still looks intimidating as hell and has the antenna ear things. Although, to be honest, I still prefer his Revenge of the Fallen head. I just think it looks a bit cooler than the Dark of the Moon one. While I like both designs overall, the ideal Soundwave movie design for me would be his Revenge of the Fallen head on his Dark of the Moon body, which is why I love his design in the Dark of the Moon game. Now, a final complaint I've seen for the Soundwave movie designs that I'd like to address is one that both of these designs tend to have in common: his color. Soundwave is often blue, but here he is a shade of gray in both movies, causing many to claim that because of this color choice, it has made him look bland. There is a type of stigma attached to the idea of character redesigns in movies making characters look like boring, bland messes, usually with less vibrant colors than what they originally had, such as gray. I totally understand this. I too think that there is a disease plaguing the entertainment industry where these companies keep taking fun character designs and turning them into bland nothings. However, I don't think that this applies to movie Soundwave at all. Just because a character design has gray doesn't automatically mean it is one of these boring redesigns. There are plenty of ways to work shades of gray into a character design while keeping the design fun and interesting. I think this works with Soundwave here. Even with the gray color, he always stood out to me with his stocky build, the way the car bits are rearranged to be parts of his body, his arm speakers. Lots of good detail here. Some people also tend to say that most of the Decepticons in the Transformers movies are gray, with just a few exceptions. But no? That's just outright not true. Sure, a few of the Decepticons in the films do have gray color, but for every one Decepticon with gray, there's 2 or 3 other ones with different colors. So this complaint of most of them being gray is just incorrect. Unless this complaint is referring to how the protoform Decepticon soldiers are gray, and in-universe there are quite a few of them. But even if this is the case, this complaint still doesn't really apply to Soundwave. He's an entirely different shade of gray than the protoform soldiers are, and he becomes an even brighter color in Transformers Dark of the Moon. He's practically white here. He definitely stands out from the rest of the protoforms, and has his own unique design. Plus, he also has blue lights on his body that he tends to shine at times. He looks awesome here. I get people can like or dislike whatever designs they want for whatever reasons. It's just that I've found the main reasons that people give for not liking these Soundwave designs to not make a lot of sense, as I have just explained. And finally, if your issue with this Soundwave design is that it's something rather new and isn't merely a live-action version of the G1 design, then can I please ask you to open your mind to new things? I talked about this in the Shockwave video, and you know what? I'm going to make the same point again, because it also applies here. Play that argument from that video. Me? Look, here's my stance on character redesigns, okay? I don't care if a character redesign isn't 100% accurate to the source material. As long as the redesign is fun, creative, interesting, etc., and fits the character it's supposed to be, I won't have a problem with it. For an example, how about the Mandarin? The Mandarin from Iron Man Armored Adventures doesn't really look like comic Mandarin at all, but I don't care, because this design is really creative, it's fun, and it fits the character. Meanwhile, MCU Mandarin also doesn't really look like comic Mandarin, but in this case, I find his design to be really dull, boring, and generic, so I'm not a big fan of it. Anyway, this is my stance on character redesigns, though I do encourage you to take on a similar stance if you don't already, because I find that it encourages creativity instead of just getting the same thing over and over and over again. Same thing goes here. For all the reasons I've given above, I find that both of these designs fit the character of Soundwave quite well. Also, I don't know how some people will say these designs are bad for not looking like G1 Soundwave, and then these same people, you know who you are, will turn around and praise other Soundwave designs, like the Transformers Prime one, who arguably looks less like G1 Soundwave than the movie designs do. Don't get me wrong, I love the Transformers Prime Soundwave design so much, but it baffles me that some people will have this double standard when judging Soundwave designs. Just, if you have to complain, be consistent. Alright, I think that just about covers it for his designs. Let's move on for now. Okay, now let's finally get into Soundwave's characterization in the film. A lot of the complaints I see against movie Soundwave say that he was underused, weak, was a waste of potential, and didn't always fit the character of Soundwave. I would argue the exact opposite. I found this Soundwave to be a solid representation of the character who pulled off quite a bit in both films despite his screen time being rather limited. So, to show I believe all this to be true, I'm going to go over Soundwave's role in both of the films he appears in to show how he proves himself to be an effective, imposing antagonist, and a great adaptation of the character of Soundwave. So, starting of course with Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, let's set the stage. At the end of the first film, the Autobots and their allies defeated the Decepticons and their leader Megatron, who was killed by having the Allspark get shoved into his chest, which destroyed it in the process. A remaining sliver of the Allspark was taken by Optimus Prime, the dead Decepticons were dumped into the ocean, and Starscream, one of the few remaining Decepticons, took off into space. The Autobots have formed an alliance with a special ops force called Nest, and the Allspark sliver was put under their custody. Together, they track down what's left of the Decepticon forces on Earth. Needless to say, the Decepticons are a mess. The ones we see left have no real clear goals or intentions, they're just running amok. We soon see a small Decepticon drone spying on some of the known Autobot allied humans with another small Allspark sliver in their possession, which had recently been found on the clothing Sam wore back during the Mission City battle. Then, we see that this small drone, Wheelie, is directly reporting to a Decepticon, Soundwave, who tells the drone that he needs to follow and retrieve the Allspark sliver, showing he clearly has some kind of plan going on. All of the Decepticons have been without direction for some time, mostly just hiding and running around. Optimus says they're all looking for something, the matrix of leadership, but they have no idea where to look for it. But Soundwave is the first Decepticon we've seen so far who's actually calm and collected despite the current situation of his faction. And we know why, as based on the fact that we see him dictating some mission steps to Wheelie, we know he's got some kind of plan. And actually, while we're here, let's talk about his voice real quick. The Frank Welker himself, the original voice actor of several Transformers, including the original Soundwave, has reprised his role as Soundwave for these films. Just like how Peter Cullen came back for Optimus, Frank Welker, before coming back as Galvatron and Megatron later, is back as Soundwave. And to no one's surprise, he's great here.
Decepticons, mobilize. It is time.
Soundwave has such a deep, imposing voice, it's excellent. And if you, for some reason, don't like the way his voice sounds, don't take it up with Bay and his team, take it up with Frank Welker himself. Play the tape. Me again?
My first working with Michael on Soundwave. He says, okay, Frank, let's hear your Soundwave. But if you move in on that mic
And really relax the voice. It gets very large.
So I remember Michael saying, okay. Guys, what do you think? And they were going,
See, Frank Welker had full control over the way Soundwave would sound in the films, and I think he came up with something great here. Anyway, the next time we see Soundwave, he flies over to a US military satellite and seizes control of it. From there, he uses some techie tendril things to hack into the satellite, accessing its video and audio transmission feeds. This allows him to spy on an ongoing conversation between Optimus Prime, Nest, the Pentagon, and National Security Advisor Theodore Galloway. Then, after a few minutes, Galloway brings up some confidential information, allowing Soundwave to learn where Megatron's body is and where Nest is keeping another piece of the Allspark. So, now that Soundwave knows that another piece of the Allspark is out there and the whereabouts of the Nest base that's holding it, he heads over to orbit above its location, where he then ejects Ravage, launching him from orbit towards the base. Oh hey, look at that, the guy's ejecting Ravage from his chest like the old days. Anyway, Ravage touches down near the base, easily gets around its security measures, dispenses dozens of microbots into the base who, once all inside, come together to form Reedman, who then steals the Allspark shard and escapes the base with Ravage as Soundwave planned. Later, we see Ravage board a ship where Mixmaster, Longhaul, Rampage, and maybe Scrapper are all waiting for him. They then hop off the ship shortly after and dive down into the ocean, eventually reaching the bottom and the resting place of Megatron's body. If it wasn't apparent yet, this was the goal of Soundwave's plan. The reason he was looking for any remaining Allspark pieces. The reason he calmly waited in space monitoring the world below. The reason he spied on confidential communications between the Autobots and their allies to find Megatron's body. The reason he sent Ravage on this mission was also that he could potentially use a piece of the Allspark to resurrect Megatron, and oh my god, he's perfect. No, I'm serious, this is perfect for the character of Soundwave. The first time we ever see him in these movies, and he's in the middle of planning a way to resurrect Megatron. And you know what makes this even better? So far in the film, we haven't been told who assumed command of the Decepticons in place of Megatron after his death, if anyone at all. However, once Megatron is ultimately resurrected and heads to the downed Decepticon ship the Nemesis that's acting as a base, we find out that the Decepticon who took over in Megatron's absence was Starscream. With this context now in mind, looking back, this all gets even better, as it means that Soundwave heard that Megatron was dead, saw that Starscream had taken place as leader, went, "Oh fuck no," and immediately started to try to find a way to get Megatron back. This is what a great Soundwave is. Alright, I need to address something here that I already covered. This is where those complaints that say Soundwave did nothing in this movie fall flat. As I said, Soundwave successfully locates where Megatron's dead body is and where another piece of the Allspark can be found, sending Ravage after it, who successfully retrieves it and joins several Decepticons in a dive down into the ocean to find Megatron's body, where he is then successfully revived with the Allspark piece thanks to Soundwave's plan. Do you have any idea what this means? Megatron coming back from the dead, Starscream getting overthrown, Optimus Prime getting killed, the Decepticons attacking Earth, the Fallen getting a chance to reveal the existence of his kind to the world, the need to find the Matrix of Leadership, the entire final battle even happening, and so much more, all happened because of Soundwave taking the initiative to make a plan to revive Megatron that ended up being a success. You could even say that with this one plan, Soundwave caused most of the movie to happen. And it even goes beyond that, since this means that he technically caused all the other movies to happen. Transformers: The Last Knight happens in part due to the events of Transformers: Age of Extinction, which happens in part due to the fallout of the events of Transformers: Dark of the Moon, which in part happens because Megatron is resurrected in Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen thanks to Soundwave. Soundwave changed and carved the fates of several characters and events across the film series with his actions in Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. Anyway, the next time we see Soundwave after Megatron's successful resurrection, with Optimus having been killed, is when he calls out to the Decepticon soldiers around the world and waiting in space, telling them the time has come to begin an assault on Earth. They need to find Sam Witwicky because he has the key to finding the Matrix of Leadership, which the Fallen needs for his Star Harvester. So, in an attempt to try to find him, we see Soundwave do the most dangerous thing any character in this franchise has ever done. Soundwave dares to threaten one of the most powerful beings in the history of the Transformers franchise, Sam's mom, Judy. Judy scoffs at this pitiful attempt of a demand, telling Soundwave his threats sound like mere mouth breathing before hanging up on him. I have no evidence that Judy Witwicky could defeat Unicron, but I don't have any evidence that he could defeat her either. Sam's mom has no rules, no boundaries. She has shown no regard for the law enforcement of mere mortals. She scoffs in the face of loaded weapons and mysterious agents. She will make the government bend to her will so she can get a pool and a hot tub. She sees through the lie that is society and does not conform to its wishes. She will skinny dip, and you can't say shit about it. What the hell am I doing? Okay, but seriously, no. Soundwave, having seized control of another satellite, uses it to straight up call Sam's mom while she's with Sam's dad and the man she tells him where Sam is. And when she hangs up, several Decepticons are sent down to their location to kidnap Sam's mom and dad, which leads to a whole other string of events. Also, I love how Sam's mom was just talking on the phone with one of the highest ranking evil aliens of his faction, and she didn't even know it. Anyway, the final thing we see Soundwave do in this film is spy in on ongoing CIA communications, which allows him to locate Sam Witwicky when he goes through a checkpoint near Egypt that identifies him. Soundwave then announces to the Decepticons of Sam's location having been detected, which pretty much leads to the whole final battle of this film happening. So, while Soundwave may not be in this movie for very long, he still leaves a major lasting impact on this franchise, while also portraying several characteristics that you'd expect to see from Soundwave perfectly. But before we move on, I'd like to address something in the film that some claim is Soundwave showing incompetence. That being the fact that Soundwave never checks back in on Wheelie after he sends him to try to retrieve the Allspark sliver from Sam and Michaela. Did he forget about him? No, he just found a far better option. While spying on the communications between the Autobots and their allies, Soundwave, again, learns not only where Megatron's dead body is, but also where another piece of the Allspark is being held. It's not that he forgot about Wheelie, it's that he just found another option. There's no clear indication on how long it will take Wheelie to get this Allspark sliver from the humans who are constantly moving place to place, surrounded by people at all times. So, a faster approach would be to send Ravage to infiltrate an isolated base where the Allspark piece can't go anywhere. Then, once the Allspark piece was used to resurrect Megatron, there was no real need for the other one. Its purpose had been served. Now, I've seen another argument about this that goes along the lines of, but Blot's wave, part of the point of Megatron getting the Allspark was so that the Fallen could access its information and find out where the Matrix of Leadership was. Why wouldn't they use either of the Allspark pieces to get this information? Well, as you'll remember, that information is now gone. It was transferred into Sam when he once again came into contact with the piece caught on his clothes, meaning it's gone from the other physical remains of the Allspark and is now, as the Fallen says, within Sam's mind. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's move on to Transformers Dark of the Moon. So, ever since the Fallen was defeated in Egypt, the Decepticons have been in hiding, while the Autobots and their allies help with human conflicts while also looking out for any signs of their return. However, an informant tells NIST that a Cybertronian artifact is located in Chernobyl, which the Autobots and NIST go to investigate. While there, they are suddenly attacked by Shockwave, and this is where Shockwave causes the movie to happen. I already spent a long time explaining this in my Shockwave defense video, so I'm not going to go into all that again here. If you didn't see that video and want further elaboration on how this movie happens because of Shockwave, I encourage you to just go watch that video. Anyway, while that's happening, Decepticon Minicon Laserbeak, who's been spying on our heroes, flies out and kills the informant, leaving no trace of their prior contact. Later, we see Megatron going about his business in Africa, where he's remained ever since the Fallen was defeated in Egypt. After Starscream pisses Megatron off with some fake sentiment, Laserbeak arrives with Soundwave, who we finally see in a robot mode at last. During this scene, we find out that Laserbeak was sent by Soundwave to make the informant arrange the Chernobyl meeting. From there, Soundwave then sends Laserbeak to kill the rest of several other Decepticon informants with their services no longer needed. This provokes one of the informants, the mighty Deep Wang, to go to Sam Witwicky about this Decepticon activity. This ends up getting Sam once again involved with the Autobots and the Decepticons, causing a major part of this film's story to happen, which is all due to Soundwave and the orders he gave Laserbeak to carry out. Not only that, but the reason Sam was at this job, which allowed Wang to meet him to set all this in motion to begin with, is because of a recommendation from Dylan Gould, which, as we later find out, is because he is under Soundwave's orders. So that's another thing that Soundwave causes to happen. Anyway, Laserbeak eventually catches on to Wang, having realized he's been talking with Sam, and in response to this, the most epic showdown in the history of cinema ensues between Laserbeak and Deep Wang, which results in Wang being thrown out of a window and killed? This seems rather impossible, seeing how Deep Wang is clearly another all-powerful being on a tier similar to that of Sam's mom. Perhaps he merely allowed Laserbeak to kill him so he can use that as an excuse to ascend to an even higher form. Anyhow, in wake of this, Laserbeak then proceeds to tear up the office as he tries to get Sam, who manages to get away, which causes him to get caught up in the Autobot-Decepticon conflict once more, as he seeks to warn the Autobots and Nest about the attack. Later, he and Seymour Simmons figure out that the Decepticons wanted the Autobots to find Sentinel, and that they had been set up by Shockwave from the beginning. The pieces for a grand scheme were laid out years prior, which we'll get to in a second. Sam later witnesses Sentinel Prime's instruments of destruction-style betrayal, prompting him to go find Carly, who earlier was off to a party arranged by her boss Dylan in a car he had gifted to her. But while Sam tries to leave with her, Dylan makes a remark that gives the impression that he is in on the Decepticon scheme, prompting Sam and Carly to try to get out of there as fast as possible. But as they're racing out in Carly's car, it suddenly begins to transform, throwing the two out onto the ground as it does a 6 spin to reveal that the car was Soundwave all along. This is where the spy aspect of Soundwave's character has come into play again. Sam had no reason to believe beforehand that Dylan was working with the Decepticons, so when he found out Dylan had given Carly a car, he had no reason to be suspicious of it outside of it just being Dylan trying to warm up to Carly with an elaborate gift. But with Soundwave appearing to be a car belonging to humans so closely associated with the Autobots, it gives him several opportunities to try to listen in to see if he can obtain any potential important information from them. Also, I love how Mirage and Sideswipe come this close to one of the highest ranking Decepticons and are entirely unaware that he's right there. Anyway, but more so, it allows Soundwave to take the partner of one of the Autobots' closest trusted human allies hostage, using her as leverage against Sam in order to force him to get the Decepticons whatever information they want from his Autobot friends, which in this case is seeing if he can find out if they have any plan to fight back against them. This way, they can stop any potential future counterattacks the Autobots may have and catch them by surprise. Also during this scene, Dylan reveals that Soundwave had come to Earth years prior, having gone to his father to make it so that no one could return to the moon. That way, no one would discover the Decepticon activity that had been going on up there, with Soundwave presumably handling that whole operation as Megatron had expressed earlier. This, if anything, was an ultimate Plan B. It would appear that Soundwave wanted to have this whole operation with Sentinel and the pillars ready should Megatron wish to go through with it upon his return, as part of the plan to get the Allspark was to use it to learn where the Matrix of Leadership was, as, in addition to being the key for the Fallen Star Harvester, it was the only thing that could revive Sentinel Prime. Although, as Megatron said, this whole plan was waylaid. The rush to activate the Star Harvester also took priority over reviving Sentinel, for obvious reasons. Well, when this failed, and the Autobots ended up with the Matrix, Shockwave came in to kick off the Revive Sentinel so he can use the Pillars plan, which again caused Transformers Dark of the Moon to happen. But while Shockwave caused that movie to happen, a large amount of the groundwork that allowed Shockwave to cause it to happen was arranged by Soundwave, making sure humans couldn't get back to the moon so that the Decepticons could get the pillars in secret, the connections to Accurata and NASA, the Decepticon informants, all of it was Soundwave's doing. Shockwave may have caused the movie to happen, but Soundwave caused Shockwave to be able to cause the movie to happen, if that makes sense. Anyway, as the film progresses, Optimus tells Sam that there is, in fact, no plan to fight back. The Autobots are seemingly destroyed, Soundwave accompanies other Decepticons in delivering Sentinel's pillars to Chicago, the Decepticons attack Chicago, the Autobots return later to help Sam and his team defeat the Decepticons, Carly is rescued, Laserbeak gets killed, Shockwave comes back, and so on and so on. Eventually, after a confrontation with Shockwave's Drillerbot, Optimus is taken down by Shockwave, leaving him trapped for the time being and the Autobots without their leader, where several of them are captured and taken hostage. Bumblebee, Ratchet, Mirage, Wheeljack, and Sideswipe are all being held hostage by some Decepticons being overseen by Soundwave. Dylan is there and he's stressing out, as now with the knowledge that the Autobots are alive, it means they may have a chance at being stopped by them. Which, if they are, spells trouble for him, since it's now known that he was an accomplice to the Decepticons and helped make it so they could go on their murderous, destructive rampage and they're taking over of the city. If the Decepticons lose, he is facing some damning criminal charges. Dylan kinda freaks out, wanting the Autobot prisoners dead as soon as possible to get them out of the way and not take any chances. So he walks up to Soundwave and tells him that he needs to teach them about respect, to which Soundwave obliges. And let's take a second to address that, as many interpret this as Soundwave taking an order from a human, something that the character of Soundwave should never do. Same for another scene from earlier, where Dylan requests Soundwave to retract several of his sharp tendril arm things away from Carly when he was getting ready to harm her with them after taking her hostage. However, in either case, no, Soundwave is not taking any orders. As you may remember, Dylan earlier made it quite clear that he answers to Soundwave, not the other way around, even going so far as to say this.
They will slaughter her, do you understand me? In the time it takes you to blink, they will do it to her, and they will do it to me.
If he disappoints Soundwave or Laserbeak will kill him without a second thought. He is in no position to give Soundwave any kind of orders. So when Sam finally gives in to his demands and tells Dylan he'll get the information he wants from the Autobots, Dylan, in return, wants to let Carly's life be spared for the moment. So he merely asks Soundwave to stop threatening Carly. He doesn't give him an order, he doesn't demand it, he just calmly asks Soundwave to stop, even putting a please in there.
Soundwave, would you please?
To which Soundwave obliges his request and retracts the weapons away from Carly. Then, later, while the Autobots are being held hostage, Dylan is clearly stressed for reasons I already explained. If the Autobots win, he is fucked. So, under the pressure, clearly wanting the Autobots out of the way, he walks up to Soundwave and, again, tells him he wants him to teach them about respect, whether this means he wants them to be beaten or killed. Then, in response, Soundwave does this.
This was all business, but now it's personal, do you understand me?
He laughs at him. He's just amused at the temper of the human, to which he then says that he understands what he means, realizing it's a good idea, to which he then announces that there will be no prisoners, only trophies.
No prisoners, only trophies.
Wow, that is one haunting line. And because of this line, Barricade takes the initiative to begin executions, starting with Wheeljack. And while Barricade delivers the killing shot, Wheeljack's death is caused by Soundwave, as he's the one who gave the order to begin executions. Anyway, after Wheeljack is executed, Soundwave then proceeds to haul Bumblebee out in order to execute him personally. Which, actually, real quick, did you ever notice something about the way these executions play out? This is just my observation, make of it what you will. Wheeljack is the first one to be executed, not one of the Autobot higher-ups like Ratchet or Bumblebee, Wheeljack. Could this be because the Decepticons realized his weapons were responsible for Starscream's death? Hence why they had him executed first, as a means of revenge? Then, after Wheeljack, Soundwave wants to personally execute Bumblebee. Could this be because he realizes that Bumblebee is responsible for the deaths of his minicons, Ravage and Laserbeak, and wants to personally execute him as means of revenge? I'm just saying, do with that information what you will. Anyway, as Soundwave raises his weapon to deliver a killing blow to Bumblebee, a Decepticon ship crashes above them, as it has been sabotaged by Wheelie and Brains who boarded it earlier, causing all kinds of debris to fall on the unsuspecting Decepticons below. With the Decepticons disoriented, Bumblebee, not wasting a chance to escape death, immediately turns to start to battle Soundwave as the rest of the Autobots join in. After a fairly even battle between the two, Soundwave delivers a heavy punch to Bumblebee, which Bumblebee then uses as an opportunity to uppercut Soundwave with his cannon, blasting his head off and killing him at last. Now, some take issue with this battle and Soundwave's death, claiming that it was too anticlimactic and that Soundwave appeared incompetent or weak. But let's analyze this scene to get a good idea of what actually went down here, as I don't find these claims to be accurate to what we're shown. The idea of Soundwave being killed by Bumblebee in a fight may sound absurd at first. After all, Bumblebee is typically a younger, friendly, smaller Autobot. How would he manage to kill one of the highest-ranking Decepticons? Well, we have to keep in mind that this Bumblebee isn't your typical Bumblebee. Yes, he's still young and friendly, but the difference here is that this Bumblebee has been shown time and time again to be quite experienced, and a rather competent, skilled fighter. Soundwave here isn't fighting a small, childish Bumblebee. He's fighting a warrior Bumblebee with experience and skills. He's not one of the weakest Autobots out there. Rather, if anything, he's one of the more powerful ones. Soundwave tries to shoot Bumblebee with his sonic cannons, but it's hard to hit him since he's so close to him and so agile. Not to mention, he's also getting shot at by the other Autobots. Yeah, in this shot, I know we were all focused on Bumblebee and Soundwave here, but if you look just to the right, you can see Ratchet opening fire on Soundwave. Soundwave blasts Ratchet with his sonic cannons, but this gives Bumblebee enough of an opening to get close enough to Soundwave for some close quarters combat. Throughout this fight, we watch as Bumblebee time and time again blast Soundwave with his cannons. Getting hit by these cannons at such close range would have dealt great damage to most other Decepticons, but they hardly do anything to Soundwave. Hell, we see Bumblebee blast this Decepticon's head apart with just 2 shots of his cannon. But when he starts shooting Soundwave in the face with it, it does nothing to him. This whole fight, Bumblebee kept on blasting him with this thing, and he went completely unharmed by it. It just goes to show how durable the guy is. All Bumblebee even manages to really do to Soundwave throughout the whole fight is provide some hits with enough impact that one of Soundwave's cannons would be knocked out of his hands. Anyway, it's not until Soundwave delivers a strong gut punch to Bumblebee, causing Bumblebee to keel over, that Bumblebee takes advantage of his position to deliver a strong uppercut into Soundwave's torso with his arm cannon, which he fires upwards right into Soundwave, blowing his head off and finally killing him. I liked this death scene. Bumblebee and Soundwave were quite evenly matched. One was too fast to hit, and the other was too durable to take damage. It's not until one took a serious hit from the other and used it as an opportunity to deliver a final blow that one of them actually won. Soundwave had been defeated before by just single hits, and watching him take hit after hit here without going down was nice to see. Now, I want to take a moment to address something else that happens during this fight. Something that makes this final blow a much more dire situation. That being, after Soundwave has his cannon knocked from his hand, as he gut punches Bumblebee, he also grabs his head. What if I told you that this was about to be Soundwave's final blow to Bumblebee? Now, I know I made a point towards the beginning of this video about not using tie-in media to support my points and claims, but in this instance, I'm using another adaptation of the same source material, which, while still technically is tie-in media, it's not explaining something we don't see, it's adding context to something we do see. But still, take it with a pinch of salt, it is speculation to a degree. But in early drafts of Transformers Dark of the Moon, during the execution scene, instead of Wheeljack being executed by Barricade, Mirage was executed by Soundwave. While this was changed for the final film, it still made it into its novel and comic adaptations. And how do we see Soundwave kill Mirage? He grabs his head and tears it off. Knowing that Soundwave kills enemies this way puts a different spin on Soundwave grabbing Bumblebee's head here, doesn't it? If this is the case, it means that Soundwave was mere moments away from ripping Bumblebee's head off here, and if Bumblebee didn't make that last second blow, Soundwave would have killed him. But again, what makes this speculation is that this context is not in the movie. As with Mirage's death having been removed, it also removes the context of why Soundwave does this move. But why was this scene, potentially providing some important context to the Bumblebee and Soundwave fight, removed and rewritten anyway? Well, I looked, and I couldn't find a definitive answer for this. But here's a theory of sorts I've pieced together about it. Francesco Quinn, who played Mirage in the film, sadly passed away due to a heart attack just about 2 months after the film was released. Did you ever notice how Mirage just suddenly stopped having lines at one point in the film? After the highway battle scene, Mirage has no more dialogue, while everyone else does. It's almost like one day Francesco Quinn just didn't come in to record any more lines for his character. I'm just wondering, maybe in the months leading up to his untimely passing, Mr. Quinn encountered some other health issues as symptoms, as some do, so he took a leave from the studio at some point, not being there to record any more lines for Mirage. Then, feeling it would be distasteful to have the character belonging to the actor with health issues die, they rewrote the final script to have Wheeljack be the one to die instead. Again, I looked and looked for any solid proof of any of this, but there was nothing. So, I'm not saying this is definitely what happened. I don't have proof of it. It's merely my theory of sorts, and I'm just saying that if this is in fact what did happen, I would not be surprised. But nevertheless, I thought I'd highlight this possible removed context for Soundwave grabbing Bumblebee's head as a means of a final blow, making the situation more dire. Do with this information what you will. Anyway, Bumblebee tosses Soundwave's body aside, and with him gone, the Decepticons still left after the battle retreat and regroup with Shockwave. Meanwhile, the Autobots and Nest prepare for a final battle against Shockwave, Sentinel, and the rest of the Decepticons as they make their final push towards taking down Sentinel's control pillar. And, as for Dylan, now that Soundwave is no longer there to protect him, he has to get involved with the fight to try to help the Decepticons win in order to avoid certain punishment for his actions, which eventually leads to his death. Throughout the films, Soundwave proved himself time and time again to be one of the most effective Transformers in the whole film series. From using spy skills and careful planning, to using deadly tactics to force others to bend to his will, Soundwave was responsible for making so many events happen in the films, even causing just about the entire film series to happen the way it does by successfully launching a mission to resurrect his true leader. Throw on top of all that his designs, his minicons, his weapons, and the fact that Frank Welker was back to voice him, and what we have here is one great Soundwave. As I already mentioned, Soundwave practically causes the entire film series to happen the way it does. Even after he's gone, results of his prior actions still unfold. The first time Megatron was killed, Shockwave wasn't around yet and Starscream was an incompetent leader, so the Decepticon faction was a mess until Soundwave came in to give some guidance, which resulted in Megatron being resurrected, Starscream getting overthrown, and the Decepticons getting back on their feet. But then, Megatron is gone again, as well as Shockwave and Starscream. With Soundwave now gone as well, the Decepticons have no real guidance of any kind anymore after the Battle of Chicago. The Decepticon faction falls to shit. There is no order. As we see, they're all on the run, either taking residence on what's left of Cybertron, or getting hunted down to be killed or captured. The only time the Decepticons even begin to slightly get back on their feet is years later after the Battle of Chicago, where a few of them rally together behind a reborn Megatron, where he and Quintessa provide a chance for their home to be restored. But they really are never the same again. Also, in Transformers The Last Night, Vivian Wembley questions Autobot Hot Rod about who he is as he is taking her to meet Cade Yeager and Edmund Burton at Fulgen Castle, asking if he's Shockwave, Soundwave, or just one of the famous ones. Of course, nothing really major, but I do think that it's neat that the identities of some of the more dangerous Decepticon threats were announced to the public, which, of course, included Soundwave. Okay, something I tend to see rather often are people comparing the Bay film Soundwave to the Bumblebee movie Soundwave, saying that the Bumblebee movie Soundwave is the better Soundwave in just about every way, despite the fact they are comparing a Soundwave with several seconds of screen time to a Soundwave with several minutes of screen time. I do not understand this comparison, so I'm going to address it here real quick. First off, in terms of design, I understand why people like the Bumblebee movie one. It looks a lot like G1's Soundwave, but now in live action. However, I still prefer the Bay film's designs. While I do like his design in the Bumblebee movie, it's essentially a design we've pretty much seen several times before, and a design we'd see another several times after. Meanwhile, his designs in the Bay films are just more original to me. They stand out more, and I appreciate all the effort that clearly went into them. Now, in terms of what they do in their movies, I've already spent a long while explaining how the Bay film Soundwave causes dozens of events in his film series to happen, such as launching a mission that successfully resurrects Megatron to laying the groundwork that allowed the third film to happen, among dozens of other things. So, what does Soundwave do in the Bumblebee movie? Well, in his first appearance, he simply shows up along Starscream and Shockwave, ordering the Decepticons to attack.
Decepticons, attack!
Which they were already doing, but okay. Then, later, we see him send Ravage to attack Optimus Prime. Optimus quickly swats Ravage away, only to find that he is now surrounded by over a dozen Decepticons, including Soundwave. Wow, I wonder how he's gonna get out of this one and...
Old friend, you kept this planet safe.
Oh, he just does. They don't show us how Optimus gets away from this, but apparently he somehow did. Soundwave had the enemy leader right in front of him, surrounded on all sides by over a dozen Decepticons, and he somehow managed to let him get away. Soundwave has only a few seconds of screen time in this movie, and based on what we're shown, he's already looking a bit incompetent. Whereas in the Bay films, Soundwave pulled off several successful spying missions and operations that affected the overall film series in several major ways. So, yes, until this new film universe figures out what it's doing, I mean, it already introduced literally Unicron while Megatron has yet to be seen or even mentioned, and brings its Soundwave back to try to add more to him, I will stand by my belief that the Bay film Soundwave is the better of the two. Well everyone, you've made it to the end. This has been my big ol' movie Soundwave defense video. Did I really just spend over an hour talking about a character with several minutes of screen time? Yes, it appears I did. Welcome to my channel. This seems to be a thing that I'm doing now. I wanted to show you all how these films nailed the character of Soundwave, and how he managed to be an incredible, resilient, intelligent, strategic mastermind of a villain despite having a limited amount of screen time. From causing several major events in his films to happen, to being part of the reason the entire film series plays out the way that it does. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if I changed your mind on movie Soundwave for the better, again, by all means, please let me know. It shows that these videos are indeed worth my time and effort, and I really appreciate that. However, if I somehow still didn't change your mind on movie Soundwave, then I hope you at least understand where I'm coming from when I say that I love the guy. In the meantime, this video is one that was rather special to me, and while it was quite lengthy, I just want to thank you all for staying around this long, and of course, thank you for watching. I'll see you around, folks.